Okay, I've got 5 after, so to the committee, welcome. Thank y'all for being here. This might be a first for the Agricultural Consumer Affairs Committee being 341 here, but we got plenty of room, and thank you, Legalize, for seeing about scheduling some of these rooms, and they're hard to come by with a time, but I thought today here at 1 would be a good time for everybody to be here. I'm going to ask my seatmate, Representative Luricka, to open us up with a word of prayer.
Let's pray. Heavenly Father, God, we love you and we thank you for this day, God, to be here and have an opportunity to serve you and the people of Georgia. God, just guide and direct us in all that we do, the decisions that we make, that it would benefit this state and the people of Georgia, but most of all, bring honor and glory to you. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Thank you. We've got a sign-up sheet, Legalize, right in the back, of anybody that would like to sign up and talk to Representative Perkle's bill, HB 1175. I know several of you here want to speak to the bill and hear your testimony as it might relate to that bill. First, I want to call Dale Sandlin up with the Georgia Cattlemen's Association to give a little overview of what's going on in his industry in the state. I know many of you over the last few years seen some bare shells, meat cases, and a lot of issues with logistics and transportation and processing going on across our industry. And so I just thought it was appropriate to have Dale come today and give us a little update on his industry. So thank you, and I'll give you the mic.
Mr. Chairman, thank you so much for the opportunity to address y'all, members of the committee. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Dale Sandlin. I'm originally from Olney, Texas. I grew up on a cow-calf operation, and I've got most of the scars to prove it. Prior to moving to Georgia, I was the director of the Hawaii Cattlemen's Council, so held the same position there, and for the last 3 years have been the director here in Georgia. First, I want to set the stage as far as cattle production in our state. It's important to remember that cattle producers are essentially grass farmers. If we don't take care of the land and the natural resources we've been entrusted with to steward, we can't take care of the cattle that are in our charge. So it's important to remember that first. That's the starting point for us. The primary segment of the cow industry in Georgia is made up primarily of 15,000, and the majority of them are cow-calf producers, meaning they're the first point in the chain in our segment. And most of those producers have herd sizes of fewer than 100 head of cattle. About 92% are fewer than 100 head of cattle. These are folks that work day jobs. These are people that have to support the farm with off-farm income. And so anything that we do has a major shift and an impact on their bottom lines. Currently, beef demand is the highest it's been in 34 years. We have finally eclipsed other proteins, and we'd like to keep it that way. There's an old adage that if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. Well, in this case, we want to be both. So beef exports right now are extremely strong. In fact, they've surpassed $10 billion in value for the first time ever, and that's up 15% over last year. A lot of that has to do with the product shortages that are in China with their shift and loss of their swine production. However, we're also seeing very strong demand from Japan, Brazil, and other parts of the world. Approximately 80% of our processing capacity in the U.S. is held by 4 main processors, and these are the major processors. That's JBS, Tyson, National Beef, and Cargill. The cattle industry over the last few years has began a tumultuous cycle, and it all really started with a plant fire there in Hutchinson, Kansas, when one of the processing plant box rooms caught on fire. It had an immediate market shift, and we noticed that there might be some unfair pricing practices happening at that time. Since then, we have seen a major disruptions in processing and market losses to producers. The pandemic impacted our industry by shifting our supply chain from restaurant and institutional users over to the retail sector. It was really exciting and encouraging when the first news reports were coming out about store shelves going empty and seeing those beef cases empty, but the problem is we've got to refill them. We have to keep that product out and live in front of consumers. One of the other things that the pandemic has caused was processing backlogs. With the requirement of social distancing, we had to expand and keep people further away inside the plants, and the only way to do that successfully is to slow down the line. We were able to work through a backlog of the record number of cattle that we had on feed at the time. We were able to work through that backlog with extra shifts, Saturdays, weekends, and holidays, but we were able to accomplish that. In addition to that, at the start of the pandemic, we had limited stockyard activity, which caused disruptions in hay production. Many of our producers couldn't sell their animals. They had to hold them longer, which impacted that hay production there. In 2020, the U.S. Department of Justice began their investigation into unfair pricing practices by JBS, notably what we saw in the wake of that Hutchinson plant fire. And during this time, especially throughout the pandemic, producers saw an average loss of $111.91 per head. To put that into perspective for you, that's a total loss of $3.6 billion by the industry in 2020 alone. These losses spurred multiple ideas on how we could fix the cattle markets. What were some of those ways in which we could prevent this from ever happening again? Obviously not withstanding another black swan event, but also being able to rather bulletproof it for the future. Over the past 2 years, Georgia Cattlemen's Association has been active in working to address those concerns and advocating solutions for our members, specifically to increase their profitability. Currently, producers are exploring ways in which they can capture more value for the cattle they produce, especially here in Georgia. Processing has become a key topic in our industry. Many producers are starting to examine that opportunity and being able to have more control over the way in which they are able to market their animals. On top of that, feeding has become another hot topic event. Are we able to feed those cattle here? Those processing plants can't be turned on and off like a light switch. We have to keep that product rolling through there. And so producers are having to also shift some of that production practice from a spring or fall calving into a year-round calving cycle, which would afford that opportunity. So more research is needed to be done in that area for our industry if we're going to continue to move forward through there. We've also seen an increase in the amount of direct-to-consumer sales. A lot of producers are starting to reach out to their friends and neighbors and being able to sell their beef right there. Consumers want to know what's in their products. We've seen that time and time again. This gives them a great opportunity to know exactly where their food is coming from and how it's being produced. GCA is committed to their success by working on a meat cutter training certificate, especially those processors. It's great if we can build the plants, but at the same time, once they're built, they're just empty boxes. We need to be able to have the workforce that can move into that. GCA is working with our fellow agricultural organizations to help put together a meat cutter training program that would afford someone to go through a classroom course as well as a lab course to be able to learn how to break down that product and be able to make a direct impact day one when they step onto the harvest floor. We also recognize the need for cattle producers to be successful in their operations without the threat of nuisance lawsuits. Time and time again, our industry continues to deal with everything from animal rights activists to environmental activists. And please, again, remember, we're grass farmers first. We are the original environmentalists. Without our daily stewardship of the land and natural resources, we don't have that. And to be able to operate without the threat of a nuisance is incredibly important for our industry. Our organization currently is celebrating our 60th year, and next week we'll gather in Savannah for our annual convention. As part of that convention, our foundation will be unveiling a multi-year history book project called Herds and Heritage, The History of Georgia's Cattle Industry. Cattle have long since been a part of Georgia's history, going back to the original cattle that Ponce de Leon brought in 1521. Also, we hope you join us on March 15th on Crossover Day for our annual steak biscuit breakfast. We'll be set up right outside in between Coverdale and the Capitol here. So please stop by in the morning for a great conversation, a good steak biscuit. And we appreciate the opportunity to provide this update to you, Mr. Chairman, and your committee, and be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Dale. Appreciate that presentation. I see a couple of questions out there. Representative Dukes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Dale, for being here with us today. You mentioned that there were that 4 producers had approximately 80% of the market when it comes to the processing. My first question is this. What can we do as a legislature to see if we can to enhance the number of producers that are engaging in this market here in Georgia? And the other question has to do with direct consumption, where that we're going directly from the processor directly to, or are we talking about directly from I guess it would have to be the processor to the consumer.
Okay.
What are the challenges there, and is there anything that we do here in Georgia at the Department of Agriculture
Sure, absolutely.
to enhance that?
So the 80% of our processing capacity, as I mentioned, and that's nationwide, is held within those 4 companies. The other 20%, we need to grow that market share. We need more smaller regional processing plants that would afford our producers the ability to do that. Lower regulations, the ability to ease into that. I will say Commissioner Black, just this past year, put forth $7.8 million to be able to go to processing infrastructure, and those are in the form, I believe, of low-interest loans. They're currently going through the Georgia Development Authority, and that's a great opportunity for our producers to be able to do that. And then as far as direct-to-consumer, we're not like other agricultural commodities. We have to go through a processor in order to sell that to those consumers. Having the ability to sell across state lines would be great, especially if it's from a state-inspected service like we have here in Georgia. But that's more of a federal level item and issue. As far as being able to sell direct to consumers, as long as that product is processed under inspection, it can be sold to consumers.
Chairman Watson, you got a question?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Dale, I wish the fruit and vegetable industry had the same demand as the beef industry has right now from the American consumer, but that's not the case right now. They seem to prefer to import it versus buy it from us. But it's great to see this industry changing, and you've got high demand and got a lot of different things going on. And I know that our state helps fund a lot of the research that goes on and what we all do as farmers across our state. And what can we do better to help in that area? We have a large state. It's going to be different in North Georgia versus South Georgia. All this direct-to-consumer stuff. It's just your industry is just ever changing and it has a lot going on, and I know there's got to be some research needs there to help this industry move along and grow. So could you maybe touch on some of those needs for us?
So as you mentioned, the cattle industry in Georgia is pretty varied based off your geography. You're not going to raise the same cattle up in Blairsville as you would down in Tifton. But as I mentioned, feeding is one of those areas of research that we need. Being able to feed cattle in the southeast, it is possible for us to do, but we need more research there. And so things like the former Tifton Dairy property is uniquely positioned for something like that, for some sort of trial. That would be absolutely fantastic. But there's needs across the state. A lot of our research partners who do a fantastic job, whether that's UGA, Fort Valley, they do a great job, but the problem that they have is there hasn't been a lot of focus put on to improving the infrastructure needed there. So anything that we can do to help grow that research ability and be able to improve those facilities will only keep us world class, and that's what our producers would like to see. So whether that's in Athens, if that's they've got several research farms across the state. We work in concert with them on market development programs already, and we'd love to see more support in that area if possible.
Okay, thank you. We got time for one more question if we can. Representative Thomas.
Thank you. Approximately 3 weeks ago, President Biden promised or pledged to pump millions or billions of dollars into the meat industry program. Do you have any information on that and how that be dispersed? What's coming to Georgia and how this will affect your meat processing program?
Sure. So, as she mentioned, President Biden made an announcement about a month ago that he was going to place $1.1 billion, is the approximate number there. They have got that earmarked from everything from research to workforce development to low-interest loans, plant refabrication, et cetera. A lot of that is going to be ran through the USDA, from what I've been told. But there has not been a timeline shared as to when that will happen. My assumption is sometime within the next year. But again, the value in which the producers in our state are going to see that is going to be directly dependent on how they set up that program at USDA. If they set it up well, then I think we'll see some strong value. That meat cutter training program that I mentioned, that's one of the avenues that we're looking at, that amount of funds, and those funds are coming through the American Rescue Plan. So those were some of the funds that were left over there. But yeah, we're excited that amount of input may be coming, but we have not been given a dollar amount nor a timeline as to when it will come.
Well, thank you, Dale. Thank you for coming. I appreciate your association, many members you have across this state, and what they do in the industry. So thank you for this overview. Appreciate it. Next, we're going to get right into mainly what we came here for today. And Chairman Perkle has introduced HB 1175, and I asked Chairman Perkle last session we got a committee of some of you. Really invited the whole committee, if you'd like to participate. He had a couple of meetings this summer, been taking some information in on what we could do with raw milk. This is not a new issue. Chairman McCall before me, some number of years ago, had a similar type hearings about the pros and cons of this product, and we really came to no conclusion. Left things as they were then, and but I thought it was time we go back and revisit this issue. I know sales of raw milk are increasing. We've had some change of policy from several of our ag organizations from against it to in favor of it, and so I appreciate Chairman Perkle to work on this, to come and bring forward, but I really do want to tell the committee we want to hear testimony from those in our state who we do have some experts. We have some experts on this committee who know a lot, and so just want to hear about this bill, but also want to hear other testimony too. So we got a sign-up sheet. I think many of you have. Anybody has not signed up, want to speak, let me know. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chairman Perkle, HB 1175.
I actually had a former legislator, when he saw that I had this bill, he said, "Who did you tick off enough that they would convince you to carry this bill?" Raw milk sales have been illegal in the state of Georgia for human consumption for decades. This is something I know past chairmen have looked at maybe changing the law. They've all been unsuccessful. We've got a room full of people here because it is a passionate argument. This is an area of passion. I have friends on one side, and I have friends on the other. So with the chairman's indulgence, what I'd like to do right now is to just give a background and overview, walk through the bill. It's a 22-page bill, so a little light reading for you, and not going to do the Chairman Setzler version. We're going to we're going to go a little more general path, who I do love. I hope this is not meant as an affront to him, but he is very diligent in the minutia of the law. So, but I'd like to do that, walk through the bill. I know there are a number. It's a long sign-up sheet. There's a lot of public comment. And with the chairman's indulgence, I would like to then end my testimony. I have as many public comments as the chairman would allow, and then come back at the end for any questions if they have of me as the author. Would that be okay, Mr. Chairman? If that's okay, then I'm going to proceed. You weren't even listening, were you? Okay. Yes.
Yeah, we'll
Right
say-
now, there are 11 states that allow retail sales of raw milk. Our sister state to the north, South Carolina, is the most recent that had provided an avenue for the sale of raw milk for human consumption. Now, there are other states that you can purchase legally raw milk for human consumption, but they kind of go around the law. In Tennessee, for instance, you could buy a share of a cow. So if Chairman Watson's got a milk cow and I buy a tenth of the cow, then I could pay him for something, processing, the feed or whatever, and I can legally get the raw milk because I am an owner of that cattle. And so there's a number of other states that have this as a model to get around a hearing like this. But make no mistake, raw milk right now, today, right now, is being sold for human consumption. It is allowed under a animal food label that we call, and I'm going to use air quotes, I hope I don't do this throughout, but it's pet milk. So I had someone call me up, I had a reporter call me up this weekend, and you know, the raw milk thing gets, I don't know, it's pretty interesting apparently. And the reporter asked me, said, what do you mean you're going to legalize the sale of raw milk in Georgia? He said, I just saw 6 advertisements for raw milk for sale. I said, well, technically it's got to be for pets. It is not allowed for human consumption. It is not my intention. So this is a hearing only. It's for a dialogue, and that's really what I'm not interested in a monologue. This is not. I can't imagine that the bill that I have here is locked, and this is absolutely what we'll wind up with. I have no intention that that's perhaps it might have to be softened and strengthened in certain areas. I'm certain of that. But my intention is to have a dialogue. It is not my intention to increase the amount of raw milk that children consume. You know, and another person I talked to this week indicated that, you know, there is a subset of the population that feels like any processing with any product is bad, and they advocate for children to consume this, and that's not a good idea. It really is not, and I don't want that, but they are. It is happening right now. And we have no idea, the milk that is sold under a pet food label, we have zero idea what is the bacterial count in this milk. Was it after the cow was milked, how long did it take them to get the temperature down? We have no idea. It's never tested whether or not antibiotics was given to the cow before it was milked. We don't know bacteria counts, somatic cell counts, all these things that we test products for, milk products for, are not tested for pet milk because it's under animal food label. The cattle are not tested for brucellosis or TB. I feel like Chairman England, and I only have a quarter of a bottle, so I'm not going to go much longer. all that is required for me to milk a cow and sell it for pet milk is legally, is my understanding. I pay a small fee and an application for a license for pet milk, but my cattle is never inspected. And I'm not blaming anyone, but that's just the way it is right now. It's not inspected. We don't know what's happening. Regarding kids, and I did want to emphasize this because I talked to some friends this morning that are concerned if this goes through that we will increase the availability for kids. And as I walk through the bill, I'll talk to you about some of the restrictions that we have and the labeling requirements that we have for that. I am not in favor of children consuming raw milk. I'm also not in favor of kids riding their bike on the street at night. But by golly, if you do, put on a doggone helmet and reflector tape and lights. And that's what basically trying to find a framework to provide additional safety measures, consumer protections for this product. And lastly, I see there being three methods. Could be more, but I see basically three methods addressing raw milk sales in Georgia. The first is we could kick the can down the road. I'm saying publicly that raw milk is sold right now. It is for human consumption. It's sold under the pet food label. We can continue to just let it go. That is an option, and that's what we've done for 20 years. Perhaps that's what we need to do now. This is not what I am advocating for, but that is one option. Option two is to strengthen the pet food label. So animal feed. The other option is to strengthen that. Let's provide some avenue of testing for the animal food label so that when you buy the pet food, there again, air quotes, when you buy the pet food, the raw milk for pet food, that at some point the cow has been perhaps tested, at some point perhaps there has been some type of bacterial check or somatic, that there's some testing involved. That is option two. That's also not what I have in this bill. My bill is option three, and that is to regulate the raw milk as we do a grade A facility. That raw milk for human consumption will have the same standards in the animal husbandry, the testing, and the authority that the commissioner has in regulating to make sure it's as safe as we can have. So that is what this bill is, and I'm going to spend a few moments to walk through HB 1175. I've been drinking coffee all morning, so my throat gets just a shade bit dry. Turn to page, line number 33 for the members. It's in section 2. Section 1, and we're looking at definitions, the commissioner and the raw milk for human consumption means, and I'm going to skip around a lot because we have time to look at the details, and some of you are seeing this for the first time. It is a 22-page bill. There are lots of underlined new language that's added, so I think it's important that you look that through. I'm going to provide an overview here. On lines 33, raw milk for human consumption and raw milk products for human consumption, which are in compliance with this article and in compliance with the rules and regs promulgated here, may be sold, offered for sale, or delivered. The commissioner is charged with enforcing this act. The Commissioner of Agriculture. These are his duties: to inspect, cause to be inspected as often as deemed practicable for the creameries, the dairies, the butter factories, sheep, all of these places, to prohibit the production or sale of unclean or unwholesome raw milk, to condemn for food purposes all unclean or unwholesome raw milk, to take samples anywhere of any raw milk for human consumption or raw milk products for human consumption. To weigh and test, the commissioner shall have the power. This is also on 67, so I'm skipping along pretty fast. Have the power to adopt, amend, repeal rules and regulations, to implement. The commissioner is the one that is in charge of enforcing these rules and promulgating rules and procedures for the raw milk labeling. Rules and regulations to provide for the labeling of raw milk for human consumption. Also, the specifications for all glassware that they will be stored in. Also, rules and regs regarding the specifications of the installation of recording thermometers on the bulk tanks. It shall be unlawful for any person who does not possess a permit to manufacture, bring into, send into, receive, blah, 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 any raw milk for human consumption or raw milk products for human consumption. Unless you are permitted from the department, you're not allowed for human consumption. Only a person who complies with these articles receives a permit from the Department of Agriculture are allowed. So beginning in lines 102 begins the regs. And there again, I'm not going to go through all of them. But raw milk for human consumption and raw milk products for human consumption shall be examined by the department as often as necessary. There again, the commissioner, the Department of Agriculture, provides the guidance on this. Line 115, and I really wasn't, as I'm not a dairy person per se, I wasn't familiar with the process of adding milk. I mean, I would think it would make it go further, but this is the regs that show, and all of the dairy people know that you don't add milk to this, and these are the specific process by which they determine that you've not added milk to add. You know, I would imagine it's easier to sell 12 gallons of milk if you only milk 10 if you add water, and that's not allowed here, and this is how you know milk is added with a cryoscope. If it's been found to be adulterated with the presence of drugs, pesticides, herbicides, or other poisonous substances, it will be impounded and will be disposed of. 141, all grade A raw milk for human consumption shall be bottled, packaged, and sealed at the same location. The words grade A raw shall be on the external surface of the packaging for raw milk. It will include the identity of the farm where packaged. The identity will include the name, address, and permit number. This is often glossed over, but people want to know where their stuff comes from. So as a producer of butter beans, on the packaging, it shows the field where my butter beans were picked. If there's a problem, and it makes me want to be a better farmer, and there again, a dairy person. If people know this is where my product is coming from, and they can actually pull up this this little thing that's got squiggly lines on it, and can see where my farm is at, and it makes me a better farmer because I know I'm having an interaction with the consumer. Now, that will also be included on the label. The following information in print, no smaller than 12-point font. And I hate to get into the weeds on this, but I think it's important that it's not hid like the lawyer language that you'll see in the bottom of things, that it actually is in a pretty good font. This is a raw milk product that is not pasteurized. There again, these other rules and regs are promulgated by the commissioner, but these are the broad outlines that should be on our labeling for the commission for the rules and regs that go forth. Samples may be taken for scientific examination for a purpose at any time or place and examined bacteriologically for any harmful samples of raw milk for human consumption shall be collected and tested prior to the permit being. And then they use testing methodologies. I'm going to skip. I know I said I was going to skip, and I've talked a lot, but I really am going to skip now. Conduct 4 times during 6-month period. The specifications regarding individual producer milk should not exceed bacteria limits of 20,000 per ml. No positive results on drug residue regarding this particular section of the laboratory techniques. Somatic cell count shall not exceed 500,000 per ml or 1 million per ml for goat milk. Coliform not exceeding 10, and so I'm going to skip through the rest of these. It also deals with animal husbandry practices, the best practices for making sure the product is safe or as safe as can be, looking at the animal health. And it talks about what animals can be fed, the milk from lactating animals being treated with medicinal agents, which are capable of being secreted in the milk, shall not be offered for sale for the period as recommended by the attending vet. Milk from lactating animals treated with or exposed to insecticide not approved for use on dairy animals shall not be offered for sale. Animal husbandry continued on line 284. All animals producing milk for human consumption will be tested for brucellosis and tuberculosis every 12 months. And then it provides conditions if there is a positive result, which follows. Lines 319, I had some concern with some of my dairy producers. No raw milk for human consumption or raw milk products for human consumption shall be shipped into Georgia from any other state unless produced and handled under sanitary conditions no less adequate for the conditions of the state, and then not until authorization has been issued by the commissioner after careful consideration. It is not my intention to bring a lot of milk from out of the state. These are part of the things that we would like to look at. We are held to the Interstate Commerce Clause, so that is something that we can't get around, but that might have some concern for some of you, and we can address that at some time in the future. The enforcement authority is the commissioner and shall be in charge when enforcing it, in line on 364. This is what happens if you violate this, and so any violations of said provisions made thereunder shall be in continued violation. Go to Superior Court, have injunction, interlocutory injunction, permanent injunction, whatever may be allowed. Handling procedures, it shall be unlawful to handle it in an unclean, unsanitary place or in an unsanitary manner. And the rest of the legislation basically just includes raw milk within Title 26, Chapter 2 of our code. So that is a somewhat brief look through the 22 pages of this bill. And I know there are people that want to comment on this. Shall we have them talk about it, and then I could come later for questions? Would that be okay, Mr. Chairman?
Whatever you like to do, Chairman Perkle, but I think you've explained it in a lot of detail, and we'll let some other people talk, and you'll be available questions later, either here or anytime in the Capitol. So thank you for this. Thank you for bringing this. Next, I would like to bring up our Commissioner of Agriculture, our very distinguished Commissioner Black. Is he still here? There he is. Thank you. And if you could just, I don't, tell us what the situation is now. I know you got some other people in the department, but you might just sort of tell us what the status is, the inspection and or lack of, or whatever we have, the situation there, if you'd like to let our committee kind of know that, and then whatever other direction you want to go is fine.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, good to see you today. When I sat down back there, I was reminded of one of the older stories in this building. I don't know that it happened when it was actually in service here, or if it was when he was in service in Washington, but it is a true statement from the distinguished former senior senator from the state of Georgia, Herman Talmadge, and former governor, who he did say, when asked about a proposition one day, he said, I have friends on one side of this issue and I have friends on the other, and I think the prudent thing for me to do is to stick with my friends. And that's a true back to the story. You can't do that on issues. I do have friends on all different sides of this issue. We have a public health responsibility, and we have a responsibility in promoting agriculture, and so it's a delicate balance. I want to introduce two folks, Mr. Chairman. Excuse me. Jenna Marie Hannibal is our brand new, our just wonderful state veterinarian. Dr. Hannibal is here, and many of you know Natalie Adan has been leading our food safety efforts and leads what was recognized just a couple of years ago as the #1 food safety program in America from public health perspective. So we have some very good folks on our team that we're very blessed with. There's no doubt we're down from a status report, Mr. Chairman. We know we're down to about 120 dairies in Georgia. That's tough. Economy of scale have kicked in, and that's tough. Do we have a pet food program? Yes, we do. Do people drink it every day? Yes, they do. Is the one maybe a little nuance for you to know is that if you're a dairy farmer and you're a grade A dairy, then that dairy product is checked just as Chairman Perkle said. It's checked for all the things because we want to be sure that the product, and that's all checked raw. So it's not. There are other folks who have not just cows, but they're goat folk that have operations, that have smaller operations that are selling raw milk, and that's pet food. There's no doubt about that. I would love I want to ask Natalie to touch a little bit on just the process of what our inspectors do when they get there, because those folks are on her team, and I'll come back and answer any questions. But I appreciate Chairman Perkle's openness. We've had lots of discussion about this. I am not for kicking it down the road. Mr. Chairman, I would. This department and our food safety professionals would much prefer option number 2. We'd love to see our pet food program strengthened. I think there's some things we can do with labeling. I think there's some things we could do. We must do some things with testing, because we've got some new requirements for the Food Safety Modernization Act with respect to animal feed. And so the whole FSMA thing hit us 10, 12 years ago. And they're still working through things of that big omnibus food safety bill from a dozen years ago. But they later came back and brought animal feed under that so that it receives the same scrutiny. And that had, I think, some connectivity, Natalie, back with some of the dog food issues that maybe 4 or 5 years ago, where there's much greater scrutiny placed on animal feed. But that's kind of the message, and we certainly can entertain any questions and work with the chairman, work with the committee to get a product out. We want to be cooperative in that fashion. But Natalie, would you share just a little bit about what our dairy inspectors do, and if y'all? I'm proud of her. This is good folks.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. I will be brief so I can certainly help clarify or ask any questions. We have currently 6 inspectors in our Grade A dairy program. They also regulate dairy manufactured food facilities. We actually use all of them, as well as our manufactured food, our dairy program manager and associate manager. They all inspect. So 8 inspectors out there conducting inspections. We regularly go out, typically quarterly. We're collecting samples. I will tell you, if you talk to our inspectors, they a lot of times say we. They are in these facilities so much. We actually feel like a team in these facilities. We help answer any questions. We're regularly communicating with the operators on any questions or any things deviating from the normal. So our inspectors are very familiar with each facility. They help them from start up, looking at plans, working through so that they can develop the best product for Georgia and our consumers.
Thank you. Any questions? Chairman Watson.
This, thank you. Will this require more inspectors? If you've already got 8, or is this something that the 8 would do while they're there inspecting the other milk? Or will you have to have additional inspectors to do this job?
Looking at what this would incorporate, and it would certainly incorporate more. So we would be looking at developing a program with additional inspectors and staff to support this program.
Okay. So you'll need more money?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Representative Mitchell.
Thank you so much for coming and speaking to us. Could I ask you to maybe explain a little bit about when we're doing, are you involved in the milk quality testing at all? Is that your office?
So we do more of the pathogen profile testing as well as systematic cell counts and things like that in our laboratory.
And would it be possible for you to maybe give us a little bit of background on what somatic cell tests look like and what the goal is? And so what's healthy milk on a somatic cell? And what is a level of bacteria that's set as a threshold that's acceptable, and why is it set that way?
So, great question, and I will say that I typically defer to the experts, which would be our dairy program manager, and they're very familiar with the PMO and what those set requirements are. I can certainly get that information to you and the rest of the committee.
Sorry, thank you. I think that would be really helpful in this space because this bill actually does set somatic cell requirements and it does set bacterial thresholds, and I think knowing the impact of pasteurization is actually, you know, the standard of pasteurization is a 5-fold decrease of Coxiella in a sample. When we look at a 10,000 count per mil in a pasteurized product and say that's our threshold, we're really saying we expect 1 bacteria per mil in our consumed product. So when we have the same standards for both somatic cell and for bacterial counts in a product we assume will be consumed pasteurized versus will be consumed raw, we're actually increasing the risk to the consumer substantially if we're not doing apples to apples. So that type of information, although it's really technical, is I think crucial if we're going to pass a bill that specifically allows raw milk consumption by humans.
I will get the committee that information. Thank you.
Thank you. Got a question? Representative Hagan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Do we happen to have any information regarding how many people become ill or are hospitalized in Georgia after consuming pet milk? Do we have any data on that?
That may be more for our public health partners that may have that information. I do not have that information.
Thank you.
We can get that. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question. How many pet milk permits? Do we have permits for selling pet milk? How many of those are out there?
We have 82 permits.
82.
For pet milk.
And so what is the requirement for having a permit? Just asking for one, or do y'all inspect those in any way, or what happens when you get a permit?
So that is actually under our Ag Inputs division, but they do have to apply for a permit. They also do a label review, from my understanding. But as far as doing an inspection equal to our dairy program, they do not. They do not do those regular routine inspections, nor do they collect the samples.
What does a permit cost? Do you know?
I do not know.
No problem. Okay. I see another question. Representative Lim.
Thank you all for being here. Commissioner Black, I have a question for you. So I was fortunate to serve on the Raw Milk Subcommittee, and it was clear when we toured, particularly Montezuma, speaking to the small dairy farmers, they are very realistic. This is not a way for them to become wealthy. This is a way for them to survive. And something that I was fortunate to have those conversations that I would love to pose to you. As we consider raw milk, what are some other ways that we can be supporting these small dairy farmers? I know you don't have conversations about, Georgia Development Authority. Could you speak a little bit more to that, other sources that we can be doing as we consider this to potentially pair it with those measures?
Thanks, Representative. I'm going to come just 30-second diversion, because we just had the experience with the freeze in South Georgia, and when you declare a disaster, and as the chairman knows, and Representative Meeks knows, my goodness, the first thing we want to do is declare a disaster, and unless it's secretarial, unless there's a response from Congress, what that qualifies you for is a low-interest SBA loan. So I hesitate saying loans are an answer, because that's never an answer in a distress. But what you did last year in freeing up the $7 million of money that was left over from the forestry program during Hurricane Michael, if someone wanted to start on-farm bottling now, that is a prime rate loan at a 10-year loan with a 30-year AM that makes it a very attractive financial tool for investment in equipment on the farm. And I hope we're still going to see some of that in dairy. Love to see. A matter of fact, talked with a Berrien County constituent who's working with a Wilcox County constituent on the possibility of yet another meat plant this morning, and maybe they're going to use the funds for some equipment, which would be great. But those that's as far as the tools immediately at our fingertips. That's certainly one of those options.
Okay, I see one more question. Representative Mitchell will keep it quick, and then we'll move on to some more speakers.
Yes, sir. Can I ask, I want to thank you for offering the opportunity to learn more about loans that help folks who are doing the small bottling. I had a technical question, but also just to follow up on that. If folks do have pet milk now, say they have a large pet milk facility, and we do offer legislation that gives them the option to become a grade A dairy, what support is there in Georgia to help them make that transition? In addition to the bottling, what supports surround this industry to help folks who want to start a grade A dairy who are currently selling pet milk?
Representative, tell me that. Representative, that's a good question. That I hope that my good friend, the Dean of the College of Agricultural and Environmental Sciences, he's going to be up here next. That's an extension. There's an extension support system there that would do that. I hope that we're always going to be found too, whether it's dairy, whether it's on-farm bottling, whether it's meat inspection. Our regular inspectors are engaged often. We would love to be in on the front side rather than coming in on the back side saying, wow, it would really been good if the drain was right there. Representative Meeks and I have been dealing with a local issue that he has that's similar to that. The more we're engaged, whether it's on the marketing side, if it's Georgia grown, if it's the regulatory side with the experts that have facilities, we're always available to do that. And I'm sure Dean Place would echo that the partnership between our agency and Extension Services is very healthy, and we hope we'll come alongside. You may have heard me say this, but we have three reasons, I believe, for three reasons that we exist. Number one is to help people get in business. Most important part of regulation is that we help people stay in business. Sometimes when I write administrative orders, then that's the discipline side, that's the third leg of the stool, and we do that. But it'd be much better to do those first two things.
Thank you, Commissioner. I appreciate the good job you do at the department and your employees and staff and diligent, and I appreciate your willingness to come here and work with this committee in whatever direction we might have to go, and thank you. And we'll certainly continue to be engaged with your department as we try to work through this. Thank you. Next, I'd like to bring up our Dean of the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, UGA, Dr. Nick Place. Glad to have you with us, and he has a unique perspective on this. His background, I'll let him tell you a little bit about his background, but it's in dairy science. So it's we're lucky to have you here. A great Department of Extension, Research, and Teaching all across our state. And any insights you can give us into this problem we're looking at, go ahead.
All right, thank you, Chairman Dickey, and good to see you all again, and glad to be back with you, and good to see you committee members. So as Chairman Dickey said, I'm Nick Place. I'm serving as the Dean and Director of the University of Georgia's College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, and glad to be with you to speak about this bill that's in front of us today. I have some prepared remarks. I want to go through those, and I think that is going to get to actually some of the questions that came up with Commissioner Black. But then also, as Chairman Dickey has said, my background is dairy. I grew up on a dairy farm in Pennsylvania and worked in dairy science at Penn State University for a number of years. So I'll say that at the out front. So the University of Georgia, as our state's land-grant institution, our job is to focus a great deal of time on how research can improve the lives of Georgians. For us in the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences, we are focused on how our research impacts the ag industry throughout the state and the region. And today I have this unique opportunity to share with you about some of the work that we're doing with dairy producers and particularly in relation to this bill. Our small dairy producers often find themselves as seeking options to improve their market share because of often unpredictable dairy market. They often encounter very tight margins, which creates economic challenges for many producers. And instead of relying on the markets to determine prices and wondering where buyers would set their prices, producers are seeking options where they have more control, such as direct-to-consumer sales of milk and other associated dairy products. House Bill 1175 would legalize the sale of raw milk for human consumption, allowing Georgia dairy producers to begin making room in their operations for this direct-to-consumer sales option. For the purposes of what I want to say, raw milk is defined as milk that has not gone through the pasteurization process. And pasteurization is a process we've used for many years to kill disease-causing bacteria, viruses, and pathogens that might be present in raw milk. As it stands, Georgia is one of 20 states that prohibits the sale of raw milk for human consumption, including our neighbors in Alabama, Florida, and Tennessee. For smaller dairy operations, however, raw milk sales have the potential to open an additional revenue stream. It's important to note that according to our UGA agribusiness economists, the potential for significant gain to dairy farmers from legalizing raw milk sales is likely to be small. In addition to with the ability to add a pet food label to any raw milk sold in our state, it's likely that the demand for raw milk is somewhat being met through our current method we have. However, there are a number of food-related safety concerns for raw milk and products made with raw milk, which have been well documented by organizations like the Food and Drug Administration, CDC, and also our food safety experts in the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences. The primary concern here is foodborne illnesses with Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli, and other pathogens, which cattle are a natural source. Without the pasteurization process, raw milk presents a much higher risk of these illnesses when compared with pasteurized milk. When an individual is a victim of one of these outbreaks, they experience nausea, vomiting, fever, chills, and other unpleasant symptoms. And in some cases, symptoms become so severe that hospitalization is required. Risks are particularly high among infants, children, pregnant women, and other immunocompromised individuals who are hospitalized at higher rates when they become sick after being exposed to pathogens like Salmonella, Listeria, and E. coli. The risk of these outbreaks is demonstrated not only by the numerous scientific studies, but also by the existence of these outbreaks within the national population. According to the CDC records, there have been 110 foodborne outbreaks linked to the consumption of raw milk or raw milk dairy products between 2009 and 2020. Outbreaks have been recorded in many states regardless of their regulatory status related to raw milk sales. Georgia, our state, which is a state in which the sale of raw milk for human consumption is not legal, has not had a single outbreak reported during that time frame. Pennsylvania, my home state, however, is a state where the sale of raw milk is legal for human consumption, and they've recorded 20 outbreaks during that time frame, including a multi-state outbreak event, which some of you may have been familiar with. As a result of these health concerns associated with raw milk, there are also a number of liability concerns. Should an outbreak occur as a direct result of raw milk consumption, producers of raw milk themselves are at risk of being held responsible for any personal damages that may occur. This level of exposed liability has the potential to cause great financial burden on producers and would likely negate any additional revenue producers gain through the raw milk sales. So producers would need to fully understand this risk and liability and be prepared to address it. On a broader scale, there is concern about the overall image of the dairy industry. In this specific scenario, dairy's image could be tarnished should there be an outbreak, which would be detrimental to all producers, regardless of whether or not they are selling raw milk or raw milk products direct to the public. Dairy is safe, healthy, and wholesome, so an outbreak due to raw milk consumption could put this fact and perception in jeopardy. So from personal experience and from a lot of conversation with dairy producers, I will contend that dairy farming is very hard and profits are limited, especially for small producers. So as a leading college of agriculture, we are very concerned about the profitability and sustainability of our small farms. In terms of other options for added revenue, small producers might consider value-added ventures such as on-farm bottling of pasteurized milk and cream. For example, Mountain Fresh Creamery in Claremont and Southern Swiss Dairy in Waynesboro are two operations that have been successful in on-farm pasteurization, have been direct marketing their products for a number of years. Both of these operations are able, through the use of their pasteurization and processing equipment, to produce other dairy products such as ice cream, butter, and buttermilk. On-farm pasteurization and bottling offer producers an opportunity to sell directly to the consumer, but it does not present the same public health and liability risk. Our UGA extension agents across the state have either the personal experience and expertise and access to resources to assist producers who are seeking to expand their operations to include these value-added products. With each unique situation, our UGA extension agents have the capacity to address producer inquiries at the individual level. For example, UGA Extension has worked with producers to test and formulate their value-added products, such as Rockhouse Creamy chocolate milk sold at Farmview Market in Madison. Another option for producers is crossbreeding their dairy cattle with beef breeds to increase profitability. So this avenue fits best for those operations that are seeking opportunities in both the dairy and the beef sectors. Research shows that crossbred dairy beef cattle are more profitable compared to a purebred dairy cattle due to their higher rates of average daily gain, feed efficiency, higher carcass weights, and higher marbling scores. Crossbred cattle also have greater box beef value, with research indicating that prices paid for crossbred feeder calves was approximately 50 cents higher per pound. One of our college faculty members is working with a producer local to the Athens area, as this producer is working to crossbreed his herd with Akushi and Wagyu breeds, which are known for producing high marbling rates. So in addition to these, our UGA agribusiness economists suggest that increased efforts to attract dairy product manufacturing to our state is an option to support our dairy producers statewide as well. This is important in light of the fact that access to such dairy processors is very limited at this time in our state. So in closing, I want to reiterate the commitment that the University of Georgia and the College of Agriculture and Environmental Sciences has to the continued strength of our state's agriculture industry and the health of Georgians. And I appreciate this opportunity to share with you the work that we are doing related to this issue and provide a research-based perspective on the legalization of raw milk sales here in Georgia. So thank you, and happy to address any questions that you might have of me.
Thank you, Dean. I appreciate you taking time today to come here and give that presentation. I know your department's a great asset to dairy farmers and all of us across this state. Are any questions of the dean? Okay, Representative Mitchell.
Thank you for your presentation, and I'd love to see that there are a bunch of different options. You said you had worked with the creamery that was developing the chocolate milk product. Have you worked with any of the creameries that are starting up on the on-farm bottling side?
Yeah, so some of our extension agents, that's usually a really good first contact for them. For a producer that would have an interest in that area, they would go to their extension office, talk to the agent. Agent may be able to assist a certain level, but then bring in expertise from the university, particularly our college, that could help them in putting together business plans or various other kind of things they need to do in animal management, milk safety, milk processing, and things like that.
And a follow-up question to that being, folks in this bill are proposing on-farm bottling, and whether we were to look at that model or to say the model works but should have a pasteurization component. I noticed in this bill there's residue testing listed and reporting requirements that are happening in the small bottling plant. How does that get set up? Because obviously in a large co-op system, we take our milk sample on the farm and the co-op, does the testing at the plant. When we have the plant on the farm, how do we set up that regulatory mechanism so that residue testing happens and somatic cell monitoring happens? What's that system in Georgia?
Yeah, that's probably a question better answered by my colleague, the Commissioner of Ag, because they deal with all the regulation. Our job really is to be there as a resource of education and assistance to help them get started, answer questions they have, and then we work closely with Commissioner of Agriculture in his office on regulatory kinds of things. So that office would be in the best position to answer that.
Representative Lim.
Thank you, Dean Place. I had a question, and Representative Mitchell kind of started to get to it with the co-ops. How would legalization of this impact existing co-op agreements? And related to that, but also distinct, we know that co-ops existed to help, the small farmers become more competitive, but one other thing that I observed were some complaints about that system during our, tour of Montezuma. What are some things that we can be looking at, whether or not we even legalize this, to help with the co-op system, again, to make small dairy farmers here in Georgia more competitive?
Mm-hmm. So co-ops have been used by agriculture for quite some time, and particularly in the dairy sector. And when you talk to farmers, they would have different takes and understanding about cooperatives, to be honest with you. Some of them really believe in that, and others like to be more independent and kind of out there on their own. What I would say about cooperatives, this provides an opportunity for producers, whether that be dairy farmers like we're talking today or other producers, to come together and have more leverage and say in regards to their market and their products. As it is right now, particularly on the dairy, once that milk leaves that farm, then it's gone to the processor, and there's very little say that they have about that price, and they're under that basically under the thumb, I would say, of those processors. So cooperative would give them a little more leverage, I would say.
Thank you, Dr. Place, and if we need some additional help, we certainly know where to come. So thank you for being here. Very helpful.
Glad to be here. Appreciate it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Next, I am going to call Dr. Rustin and Dr. Felposh with the Department of Public Health.
Hi, Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Megan Andrews. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Policy at the Georgia Department of Public Health. One of the tasks of the department is to investigate outbreaks for various things, including foodborne illness outbreaks, so we'll touch on your question that you asked earlier. I have with me Dr. Felposh from our epidemiology team, as well as Dr. Rustin, the Deputy Commissioner at DPH, to answer your questions and do a short presentation about data and science that we know about human consumption of raw milk. Hi all.
Thank you to the chairman and to the committee for allowing us here to talk with you today. My name is Dr. Amanda Felposh. I'm a public health veterinarian. I've been with the Department of Public Health and Epidemiology for almost 10 years, focusing on zoonotic and vector-borne, foodborne, and One Health epidemiology. I earned my veterinary degree from UGA and focused on public health and large animal medicine, and I currently serve as the One Health medical epidemiologist for the state of Georgia. So as Megan shared, we're here to talk a little bit about the data. So because raw milk is not legal for human consumption in Georgia, we do not have reliable data regarding the number or proportion of people here who become sick after consuming raw milk. However, we do have national data to help us provide context to what we could expect in a state where raw milk consumption for humans becomes widely available. A comprehensive study covering outbreaks from 1993 to 2006 concluded that the risk of outbreaks linked to raw milk is at least 150 times higher than those risk of outbreaks linked to pasteurized milk. This same study found that illness was often more severe in raw milk outbreaks due to the type of pathogens that are associated with those outbreaks. In this study, there were patients that came from outbreaks linked to raw milk. Their hospitalization rates were 13 times that of patients that came from outbreaks linked to pasteurized milk. Another major study that has findings that are repeated in many other publications focuses on unpasteurized milk-related outbreaks in the US from 2007 to 2012. The study looked at 81 outbreaks across 26 states that resulted in almost 1,000 illnesses and over 70 hospitalizations. 81% of those outbreaks did occur in states where raw milk consumption in humans was legal. This study also concluded that children were at some of the highest risks for illness, and in 59% of those outbreaks, at least one child under the age of 5 was included. I believe the study was shared in the materials provided by DPH. There are also several studies that provide data related to increases in drug resistance and bacterial infections from raw milk consumption, and those are concerning both because of the increased severity of disease and the challenge in effectively treating drug-resistant infections. Disease-causing pathogens like Campylobacter, Shiga toxin-producing E. coli, Cryptosporidium, Salmonella, and Listeria are shed in the feces and are in the milk itself, even of healthy animals. Milk-producing animals like cows and goats commonly carry these microbes that are helpful to them in processes like digestion. They typically don't cause illness in those animals, but can and do cause potentially serious illness and severe illness in humans. As mentioned by others, these especially vulnerable populations, young children under the age of 5, older adults, people with weakened immune systems, and those who are pregnant are at especially high risk for these severe outcomes and death. In summary, scientific data accumulated over many years demonstrates the significant impact of pasteurization on the reduction of human disease burden. Data also show raw milk consumption can serve as a source of pathogens to human and has been associated with many outbreaks in cases of foodborne illness and in disproportionate numbers to pasteurized milk. This is also in states where it is legal, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you. Is anybody else, have you got someone else going to speak, or?
Dr. Rustin can present. He's an expert in environmental health. We also inspect.
Okay. Well, glad to have you here.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Chairman, and the committee. And first want to start off thanking Chairman Perkle for the open dialogue. We really appreciate that. And I serve as the acting deputy commissioner for the Department of Public Health. And I'm the former environmental health director for the Department of Public Health, which is one of our divisions, is our food safety division. I also grew up on a farm, a vegetable and poultry farm, so I certainly understand the concerns on the farming side as well. But what today I'm going to talk about primarily is some of the risks that we are concerned about. In reading through the bill, it's a little unclear to us if this is a direct-to-consumer bill or if it's open for the full general commerce on the market. So I'm going to speak more from the perspective of if raw milk sales is on the open market in commerce. As you heard from my colleague on the public health risks of drinking raw milk, I do want to briefly kind of discuss some of the facility risks. Our food safety division within the Department of Public Health inspects restaurants, food trucks, caterers, and one thing that we do rely on is, from the milk perspective, is pasteurization, because we know that that does reduce the risk of illness. But we also inspect facilities that provide food to sensitive populations, hospital kitchens, nursing home kitchens, or Head Start kitchens in our schools. All of those facilities obviously provide milk to their patients, to their students, And, this does bring up a concern that we have if there's just an open market on raw milk sales across the board. The code that the Department of Public Health uses for our inspection service is the FDA Model Food Code. And that particular code does require milk and milk products to meet grade A standards if they are in restaurants or in facilities we regulate. But the intent of that is for that to be pasteurized milk in those facilities. Obviously, this is to ensure the milk is free, or the risk of this milk being free from contamination and other potential pathogens that may be in it. One thing that I do want to mention is that in reading through the bill, we work very closely with the Department of Agriculture, with their Food Safety Division, and some aspects of the bill may require dual regulatory action in restaurant facilities, because we do have restaurants that make ice cream, they make yogurt, that are currently regulated by the Department of Public Health. But if raw milk is added to that, that may then require sort of a dual agency inspection for these small businesses. So that is one concern that I do want to mention. The one thing that, when you look at it from a risk perspective, I've been doing this for over 2 decades, and if you can think it up, it can happen in a restaurant. We've seen things that would make most people gag, probably, which is why we have the program in place. Some of our concerns in a restaurant or a facility environment would be around mislabeling. If the product is mislabeled, and it does happen, we get recalls every week where there's mislabeling of products that have to be recalled. That could present a concern in a facility, especially that serves sensitive populations. There could also be a potential misuse of raw milk or pasteurized milk if it's on the open market and a facility purchases that and has both a jug of raw milk, a jug of pasteurized milk in the facility. And, when consumers go into a restaurant, they don't always necessarily know what they're ordering per se. If they think they're getting pasteurized milk for the chocolate milk for their child and someone accidentally grabs the raw milk jug, that could obviously present a concern or risk. In summary, again, I want to thank everyone for the dialogue. We certainly are open to dialogue and discussion on this issue. We do believe pasteurization is important if it's going to be allowed on the open market. And this obviously is one primary way to reduce foodborne illnesses to the public, but as well as to our sensitive population. So I want to thank the committee, and I'm open for questions.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all coming. Are there any questions of this group? Representative Mitchell.
Thank you. I actually had a question on the side of thinking about if this bill isn't restricted to on-farm sales, so you do have to deal with raw milk that's being processed into other food products in a restaurant setting. How do you communicate that risk to consumers at the level of the facility? Because right now, when I buy ice cream in a cone, I have a certain expectation of safety. How do I translate that if the products are now going to be potentially health hazards?
We would have to require disclosure on the menu, which not everyone reads at the bottom of most menus, but there's usually a disclosure about products like that. That would be the best way that we could notify the consumer. They would obviously have to read the menu, and we would work through our communication channels to get the word out that this is something that the consumer needs to be aware of when they're ordering products.
Any other questions? Got one more?
I had a One Health question as well. One of the concerns about raw milk on dairies or being sold is brucella. And I know we're a brucella-free state. However, we have seen vaccine strain brucella actually make humans sick in a very large multi-state outbreak. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what brucella is, why we vaccinate for it, and whether this would be a concern in raw milk here in Georgia.
Yeah. So here in Georgia, the most common common brucellosis infection in humans is caused by Brucella suis, which comes primarily from feral swine. However, there is the Brucella abortus strain, And that is something that is commonly vaccinated for in cattle, of course. As you mentioned, in 2020, there was actually a study reported on some infections from RB51, which is a live attenuated vaccine for that strain. Since that is a vaccine strain, it has nothing to do with on-farm hygienic practices and can be passed to humans in milk, regardless of how clean the area is, how clean how good the storage is, anything like that. Brucellosis is a very serious illness in humans. It can cause chronic and lifelong issues. It can also cause issues that lead to death pretty easily. So it is a very serious concern and something that is very much worth thinking about. And, oh, go ahead.
And we usually deal with that by pasteurization, right? So we know that if this milk is consumed, that we don't have that concern.
Exactly, yes. And I apologize, I neglected to answer your direct question earlier about the outbreaks here. So although we do ask about raw milk consumption when we do investigations, we do suspect that people may not be willing to report that because of the legality of it in Georgia. However, we did have an outbreak in 2007 that was related to raw milk, and that was actually pet milk. In that outbreak, there were 3 that were ill and 1 person that was hospitalized. Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move on. We got several other people on the list. Thank y'all. If we got other questions, I know y'all will be available to either come back or answer some questions. I'm going to go down the list. Jake Trench with Georgia Agribusiness Council. I see you back there. Could you come and sort of give us a position of your organization on this and take?
Yes, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Thank you, Chairman Perkle, for bringing this legislation. And I know that there are a lot of folks signed up to speak, so I'll try to be extremely brief. But I am Jake Tench. I'm with Georgia Agribusiness Council. And this process started for us about 2 years ago. We were approached by the Georgia milk producers. They had just recently had a board meeting where they voted to change their position in favor of legalizing raw milk for human consumption. And that's when our discussions with Chairman Perkle began as well. And throughout those conversations, it was made clear that people do drink this regardless of whether it's pet food or whatever it's labeled as. They'll buy it as pet food, but they take it home, they consume it themselves, they feed it to their families. And our belief through this whole process is that if people are going to be consuming it, if we know that people are consuming this product, which we do, and if we know that there is a demand for this product, which there is, we think that it should be properly tested, inspected, and labeled. We think that first off, I just want to go on record and say that I did not start my day off this morning with a tall glass of raw milk, but a lot of people do, and that's the issue that we're getting to, and we've worked close hand in hand with the chairman, and I want to keep it brief, but we just believe that that this product, if it's going to be consumed, needs to be inspected so that it's safe as possible. We know that there are risks with the product. We understand that, but we think that going through these measures will greatly reduce these risks, maybe not eliminate them, but will greatly reduce those risks. And we're not advocating for it to be sold in big box stores. We're looking more towards the direct-to-consumer method as they're using it now, whatever it may be called. And we just appreciate the legislation. We think that it takes the right steps in the right direction to address this issue.
Thank you, Jake. I appreciate that. I think we need to move on. It's 2:30, and I'm gonna try to get through. I know some people have been waiting, and we'll do some questions at the end. Jake, I know you'll be here. Jake Matthews from our Georgia Farm Bureau, if you could come to our statewide Farm Bureau.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Jake Matthews, and I'm with Georgia Farm Bureau's Public Policy Department. Georgia Farm Bureau has approximately 250,000 members all across the state. We represent producers of anything and everything that's grown or produced in the state of Georgia. Just want to thank y'all for letting me be here with y'all today. Georgia Farm Bureau is supportive of the legal sale of raw milk for human consumption. We are supportive of this bill, and thank Chairman Perkle for bringing it. With the modern day advancements of how we produce milk and how safe it is today, we and also the dairy industry as a whole see a way forward to safely produce unpasteurized milk for human consumption. As it's already been said, currently what we have in Georgia is a pet milk label. It allows someone to produce and sell raw milk under that label for consumption by pets. We would argue, like many others have said, that it's probably not just pets that are consuming this milk. Folks are taking it home and feeding it to their families and to themselves. We do know that as a fact. So this kind of leaves us with the very situation that has always been the concern with allowing for the legal sale of raw milk for human consumption, which is that someone, a human, is going to drink it and that someone will get sick. The potential for that is already here because people are drinking it. And eventually, with the way we have it right now, someone will get sick. Therefore, we think that this bill, which makes legal the sale of raw milk for human consumption and putting in place a standard and safety measures, testing, would allow for a much safer product. And essentially, it's the best path forward for ensuring that someone does not get sick in the future. Over the course of the past decade, many of our smaller dairy producers have gone out of business. With the small profit margins that exist in the dairy industry, it just becomes unfeasible for some of them to keep going. So this right here, although it's not going to be just a windfall, an extremely profitable thing for dairy farmers, it is a lifeline for some of our smaller dairy farmers. And for that, we believe that it's a very important thing to look into. Georgia Farm Bureau is in a position of support to this bill in a way that would give us a safe product and ensure consumer confidence. Glad to answer any questions that y'all might have for me. And again, thank you for letting me be here today to speak to y'all.
Thank you, Jack. I appreciate it. And we're going to save questions to the end. So I got a couple of dairy farmers that are here. I want to get right into them. Ken Murphy, you're here. Thank you for coming this long distance out of your busy day to come here to the Capitol. And we'd love to hear straight from you.
Thank y'all.
Tell the committee.
I'm a dairy farmer. I in Meriwether County, about 60 miles southwest of here. I also haul milk, go around to dairy farms, pick it up, and take it to the milk plants. A couple of years ago, when the pandemic first started, a lot of people came to me and asked me since we couldn't buy it off the shelves was empty with milk, could I sell them milk? And I told them, no, legally I could not. You could go buy pet milk, but you couldn't buy grade A raw milk. So that's sort of what gave us the idea to do this. I'm on the Georgia Milk Producers Board. We voted to support this. We've got Farm Bureau behind us and Agribusiness Council behind us, and that's where we are today. And I appreciate y'all doing a study committee on this, and some of you I worked with doing that study, so thank y'all. I'm not here to tell you that raw milk is the safest product, but pet milk is a step under raw milk, and grade A milk would be a little bit safer than the existing pet milk law. So I'm not going to sit here and beg you to vote on this because it's a safe product. I think we're just going to make it a little safer than what it is today. I'd like to answer a question that she asked Mr. Black a while ago about the small pet farmers that are producing pet milk if they have to go over the grade A standards. And what Gary Black wants to do is not legalize for human consumption, but still keep it under the pet thing. And that's going to be a little bit of cost for those farmers. So, he's going to ask a 3 or 5 or 10 cow dairyman to go to grade A standards. is he gonna go down here at Purina at the $300 million plant they got in Union City and ask them to make grade A dog food? So that's something we ought to look into, to be fair to everybody that's producing pet food. The people back here gave you some statistics. All that is pre-2012. If you know anything about the international market, around 2012, not the governmental standards, but the supply standards for shipping milk around the world became very important to have a good quality. We had to meet what we call European Union standards. And that brought from what they is 750,000 mil on the somatic cells to 400,000. So we had to get real good with our milk. And since, I'm not saying it wouldn't be a health hazardous, but those statistics they gave are pre-2012 when we had to meet the European Union standards. I'm asking y'all to support this because I'm up here for my skin in the game. All the people who spoke before me don't have it. This is my livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Murphy. Stephen Addis, is he here? Thank you. I think another dairy farmer who's come here. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm a dairy farmer from Whitfield County, Georgia, up in the north part of the state. My family went into dairy business the day before Thanksgiving in 1982. That's 40 years this year. I have drank raw milk every day for 40 years. My daughter's 23 years old, and she has drank milk every day for 23 years. My milk's safe. Unfortunately, we got a pet food license over 10 years ago. We were still inspected because we were a grade A dairy. This past November, the day before Thanksgiving, I was cut off for selling pet food milk. We were given 6 days to, and then they wasn't going to pick it up anymore, and they have not picked it up no more. What we've not sold as pet food for the last 2 months has been poured out. It wasn't profitable in the dairy business milking 35 cows when they were picking it up. It sure ain't profitable now. But I think we need to do it safer. You know, for the last 40 years, I've been inspected until 2 months ago. I still have a pet food license, but I don't have them inspectors coming by. So, as long as I can keep a pet food license and stay in the dairy business, I can ship milk with no inspection whatsoever. And my 23-year-old daughter wants to stay in the dairy business. I intend to stay in the dairy business some form. But I was cut off from a co-op that I was supposed to be part owner in and hadn't shipped milk since. Thank you.
Thank you. I think I see one more dairy farmer, Jerry Swathford. Is he here? Committee, we're getting near the end, so hold on.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. My name is Jerry Swathford. I am a dairy farmer in Putnam County, Georgia. I'm also a Baptist minister, so I didn't prepare my message for you this morning because it would be late this afternoon before we're finished. But I do have a couple of points, and a lot of this is going to be, and I appreciate your smiles, and my time is just as valuable as all of us. I understand that there is liabilities in selling raw milk. For myself as a dairy farmer, I am not tremendously passionate
about this bill because I don't think it's going to benefit my family a whole lot today, but it may in the future. And like Mr. Murphy said one time there in his statement he was given, that there is many people that is drinking raw milk that is being consumed in the state of Georgia. And many people come to my farm and they say, can you sell me raw milk? I say, no, because it is not legal for me to do so, but I can give you some. So I have some very special friends that I give raw milk to on a very timely basis. I mean, some of them take a lot, and I give it to them. And that milk costs me and my family money because I don't charge them for it because I believe in the law. I believe in the law of God, and I believe in the law of the land. Now, what I would ask this House to think about is that now, it's already been stated, well, how much will it cost me? How much will it cost this state if we legalize the sale of raw milk? And then there's been some other questions about, well, how will we take raw milk and how will it be safe if it's consumed in that of a restaurant? Well, I would think that if this bill copies that of the South Carolina, that there is a clause in there that it cannot be adulterated in any way. It cannot be changed to chocolate milk. It cannot be changed to ice cream. It cannot be sold anything other than in a bottle of raw milk. Now, I do know some about retailing food because I was in the cage-free egg business for about 6 years in the state of Tennessee. And I know something about marketing food, and it is very, very hard for a small farmer to get a space on the retail grocery store aisle. Now, there is people that's going to continue to buy raw milk, whether it is inspected or not. And I believe in the Commissioner of Agriculture here in the state of Georgia because I work very closely with his office. And when he sends out his field lady to inspect my dairy, if the painting is not done exactly right, she's going to make me paint my barn. If my floor is not right, she's going to make me re-cement my barn. Now, if any of you have never milked cows, you ought to try to paint your dairy barn while you're milking hundreds of cows a day. That's something hard to do. But the state of Georgia has regulations that must be followed under the law for me to produce raw milk on a grade A basis. And I'm going to continue to do that until it's uneconomically possible for me to do that. And I'm going to tell you, here in the state of Georgia, we're losing because we only have 2 commercial milk plants in the state of Georgia, and we have multiple thousands of cows that is producing milk that's going all over the United States. My milk alone goes to the state of Alabama. And I pay thousands of dollars a month to have my milk shipped to Alabama. Now, if there was a market for my family to produce a safe product, now I'm going to say this also. We are more educated than we were several years ago about what we ingest, what we read, what we view. Would y'all all agree with that? We are. Whether we're a dairy farmer or whether we're a consumer, we are more educated. We have come a long way in veterinary medicine and also that of vaccinations for not only for ourselves, but for our livestock. We also feel like, some of us in particularly, feel like that we are losing some of our rights in the state of Georgia and also in the United States because of political mandates that's coming down. I walked in that door right there and I didn't have a mask, and it said a mask is required. Now, several of you dignitaries I see don't have your mask on, neither do I, and I don't want to wear one anymore. I've had COVID. We've had our vaccines, and I don't feel like I should be made to. Now, whether you are elected Democrat or Republican here in this office, the voters of this state, I can tell you on behalf of myself and many others, want a choice whether we can vote Democrat or Republican.
Let's stay on the bill.
Okay, I will.
Let's stay on the bill.
I'm getting to that, okay? But we also want to have the right whether we can buy raw milk, whole milk, or whether we can buy a pound of ground beef in the grocery store, or whether it's going to have to be cooked before I can give it to my family. Now, those of you that will be voting on this bill, You can horse trade it around any way you want to. But this is not going to die. The need for raw milk in the state of Georgia is continuing to grow because there is people that wants to buy it, and they are buying it. And those people that's producing it and selling it for $10 and $15 a gallon, they don't have Gary Black's staff out there telling them to paint their stinking walls or to test their cow every year for brucellosis that's already been vaccinated. We've eliminated brucellosis in the state of Georgia and all over the United States. We can ship cattle all over the country and not have to worry about brucellosis today. Tuberculosis. Under this bill, we would have to, if we produce raw milk, we would have to vaccinate. We would have to vaccinate for everything that we can think of that's available. We have to have an annual blood typing of our cattle for brucellosis and tuberculosis every year. We cannot adulterate this product. Is there a risk? Yes. Now, I'm going to tell you something. In my house, we drink raw milk. Several of my, like I say, my friends come and get it. Is there a risk? Yes. There a risk in me getting in my car and driving to Atlanta, Georgia today that I might get hit by another car and die also. Will it cost the state of Georgia more money if we implore more people to govern this bill? I can't tell you that. But I can tell you something. I said I'm not passionate about this bill because it may not benefit my family today. But one thing I am passionate about is the business that I am in, that I have taken everything that I possibly can scrape together to keep my family in the dairy business for the past 5 years because it has been the hardest row I have ever hoed. This is our lifestyle. It's not our job. We work sometimes 14 hours a day, 7 days a week, and if my mama dies, my cows have still got to be milked. So that you as a consumer can go to the grocery store, you buy a gallon of milk, buy a pound of cheese, butter, whatever you want. I'm asking you to vote for this bill because it'll give us as voters another choice that we feel like has been stripped away with us, those that are educated and those of us that are not so much. It will help some dairy farmers economically. And it will provide a safer raw product that is already being produced and purchased. And I think personally it will save the state of Georgia money because those guys that are milking 2 cows or 3 goats, it'll eliminate them because they're not going to be able to sell that product in a way that would be legal. And by a dairy farmer that is being inspected, that is producing a product that is safer under the guidelines of this bill, it will give our state employees the opportunity to have the attention to those producers, and it will cause the price of raw milk, in my opinion now, to drastically go down. I can produce raw milk a lot cheaper than some of those little guys. Now, economically, I don't have any statistics, and I'm telling you my personal opinion, and I'm sure it'll be rebutted. But I thank you for my time to get to speak, and I thank you for your work that you're doing, members of this committee, and for giving us the time, okay? Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you for coming. Now, who wants to follow that? Jamala Pope with Children's Healthcare Atlanta. Is she here?
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jamila Pope. I'm the Government Affairs Director at Children's Healthcare of Atlanta. This is a committee we're not normally in a lot, so by way of background, we are one of the largest pediatric health systems in the country, and our system is composed of, 3 hospitals, the Marcus Autism Center, and various other locations serving children in a variety of ways. Last year, we saw more than 350,000 unique individual patients, which resulted in over 900,000 patient visits. And we see children from all 159 counties in Georgia. We are here today to express our concerns and our opposition to HB 1175. We do not believe that there is any safe raw milk, whether it is tested or not, for children. And as we've heard already, raw milk consumption can lead to significant bacterial infections, and that young children and those with compromised immune systems are extremely vulnerable to these infections. And while I appreciate that the intent may not be to give it to children or provide it more readily to children, that will be the result of this legislation because of increased accessibility. And so for these reasons, we would just hope that the committee would not act and the state of Georgia would not move forward in this direction. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate the brevity of that. Ashley Burdett with Science for Georgia. Burdett.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone here in the committee. My name is Ashley Burdett, and I am a Newark, Georgia resident. I am a current Master of Public Health student at the Rollins School of Public Health at Emory University. I am a full-time student with 3 jobs, one of which I am representing today. I am here on behalf of Science for Georgia, a nonprofit dedicated to making sure facts are known and used appropriately in public policy. Today, we would like you to know about the known risks associated with the sale of raw dairy as proposed by HB 1175. In 1863, Louis Pasteur was hired by an alcohol manufacturer to discover why their beetroot alcohol was turning sour. Through this process, Pasteur discovered heating the liquid could kill yeast and bacteria that was causing it to turn. This process, coined pasteurization, wasn't used for milk in the United States until the late 1800s. At this time, tuberculosis was commonly carried in milk. In 1908, Chicago was the first city to pass a law requiring the pasteurization of milk. This process saved the lives of millions of Americans from disease-causing bacteria. Julie Riggs, a woman from Missouri, purchased raw goat's milk for her husband and her daughter because they could not tolerate cow's milk. Within a few days, both her husband and her daughter became violently ill. Her daughter's pancreas began to fail and her kidneys started shutting down. She was on dialysis and had to have several blood transfusions and insulin shots. The culprit? E. coli. After a month in the hospital, the 9-year-old girl was released and for months onward constantly complained to her mom about stomach pain and other movement-related issues. The risk of raw milk doesn't outweigh any possible benefit, said Julie. Mary McGonigal Martin from California wanted a healthier way to provide dairy for her 7-year-old son. Upon doing her own research, Mary found a local brand that sold raw dairy and claimed to test their product and make sure it was safe. The 3rd batch she purchased after a few months was contaminated. After 2 months in 3 different hospitals, her 7-year-old son began to have kidney failure. The culprit, again, E. coli. I don't think about the risks because all of the available information only discusses the positives, said Mary. Besides E. coli, Listeria, Salmonella, Campylobacter, Cryptosporidium, or Brucella can also be found in unpasteurized dairy products as well as in healthy cows. According to the CDC, and as you've heard these facts here already today, I will reiterate them. Across the U.S., there has been an increased number of foodborne illness outbreaks directly associated with the raw sale of milk. From 2007 to 2012, 26 states reported 81 outbreaks linked to raw milk. The outbreaks caused 979 illnesses and 73 hospitalizations, all from these raw milk products. Children are at the highest risk for infection, and even though the sale of raw milk has shown a direct relationship to an increase in infections, more states are still choosing to legalize. It is also important to note that the research shows outbreaks are also increasing in surrounding states that are legalizing the sale of raw milk. For me, this means my home state, Florida, will now be at a higher risk for being involved in potential outbreaks due to the decisions that you make here in Georgia. It is also estimated, according to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, that foodborne illness costs the United States $15.6 billion each year. The problem is, despite well-executed precautions and testing, a perfectly healthy animal on a well-run farm can also produce contaminated milk. Past performance does not guarantee future results. Testing from the day before does not guarantee safety on the day after or whenever the client leaves with your product. In states where raw milk can be sold, there are precautions being taken. These include, but are not limited to, placing warning labels on products, submitting reports of cleanliness, having restrictions on the amount of milk sold, and or undergoing on-site inspections. I do believe dairy farmers care about their cows just as much as they care about the products they produce. These farmers have every intention of selling a safe product. Even though there are precautions in place, the risk of what can happen does not outweigh the possible rewards from selling and drinking raw milk. As we find ourselves in the midst of a pandemic, we need to consider how all of our future activities can affect or contribute to the spread of infectious diseases. Let me ask you this. With an already overwhelmed hospital system in the state of Georgia, can you imagine another outbreak or rise in deaths due to a foodborne illness at the same time? Can you imagine how this law could possibly affect children living in rural areas around Georgia, also considering Georgia is 85% rural, who already have trouble accessing health care services when they are ill? One of the hardest things about training to become an infectious disease scientist and a public health professional is trying to make an impact in this world. As I put together this note last night, I had mixed feelings. Life is more than just science facts. At 29 years old, I have now been in the workforce for 15 years, from my first job at Steak and Shake to in the infectious disease laboratories and policy organizations that I intern and work for now. I have constantly experienced myself and witnessed how messy life can be and how even the best intentions can bring disastrous effects. How policies and regulations put in place don't always get followed, and promises that are made to us are never kept. Today, I speak for science and provide information on the health effects of raw dairy. I encourage you to consider that along with the other aspects of this matter. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you for this time. Committee, I have 3 o'clock. Y'all have been very, very patient. I've got 1 or 2 more here. If you could be very quick, Mr. Mathis, or you want to come make a point, and but this committee has heard a lot today, and
I appreciate the time. I'm Jack Mathis, and I promise you I know more about raw milk than anybody in this room. I started at a very young age. I ended up president of the Certified Milk Producers Association of America. We had 200 medical milk commissions that started that, volunteered their time to have raw milk, but we call it certified. Now, if you take all the epidemics that we've had in the United States, let's start back in the war between the states, and let's go all the way to 1950 or 60, and you took all these epidemics and you added them up, it'd be in the millions. What do you think the number one was, one thing that killed the under a year-old children? You know what it was? Milk. Well, Jack, darn it, you came here to help us. Why are you saying such a thing? It's true. But the question I'm saying, what kind of milk was it? Do you know? Anybody studied dairy science, you don't know. It was loose milk. Loose milk. All right, what's loose milk? The dairyman would go out and milk the cow. He'd bring the milk to the house. He'd pour out what they needed, and then he'd put it on the porch. The neighbors in walking distance would come get it and get what they needed. They'd put, when they paid for it, they'd put the money in the container. Then what was left? Guess what it was? Loose milk. Loose milk was what was killing up to 250,000 a year under a year old. And brother, when that hit the news, everybody had a fit. There's no way milk is killing that many, 250. The distributors said, well, let's find out. So the distributors did their own counting. And when they got to 350,000, they stopped counting. Loose milk was what it was. Said, wait a minute, we having so many children that are dying. Hospital was increasing the staff during the summertime from anywhere from 10 to 20%. They didn't know why it was going up. Then nurses, bless their hearts, nurses were the one that noticed something was going on. The nurses was in the homes, I forgot the name of the homes, that took in where people were selling their children and putting them up for adoption. And they had to get milk, free milk for these homes. And where were they getting their milk? It was cheap. They was getting loose milk, and they was getting a gentleman's milk, a clean milk where someone like today, if a guy, an attorney or political people can afford, they'll have them a farm. They got beef cows and horses now, but back then some of them did have dairies. And so what they would do, they would give the good milk to the home and then the loose milk, what turns into a deadly poison. When that stuff's sitting on that porch with no refrigeration, the further it got from the cow, the deadlier it got. It was a deadly poison. And they could put stuff in. They can put water, formaldehyde, all sorts of stuff in it because it was picked up by somebody on the loose milk. Loose milk was like cutting grass is today. You need a few bucks, get a lawnmower, you go cut grass. If you knew where the milk was, you could go pick it up and sell it. And that's who was in charge of this loose milk. But
Mr.
then,
Mathis, let's get to 2022 and talk about this bill.
I know you are. I've been drinking. I was calling on all across the United States and even outside the United States, training dairies on how to produce safe milk. And I'm telling you, you can produce safe milk. I'm drinking pet food, and I've been drinking it. I'm 82 years old. I can't remember when I ever had a cold. And I get it after church on Sundays, pet milk. It's absolutely ridiculous to do that. It's a perfect way for us family to have 25, 30, 50 cows and then be charged of it, but they got to put a price on the milk that it's worth instead of treating it like a gas or oil on the pricing. So anyway, it's safe. I can tell you it's safe, and I can run on like this for an hour or two to tell you the history of what all was going on and who owned the milk. Who owned the milk when they had all the babies? The distributors. Who were the distributors? They didn't have any cows. I have all the records, medical milk records, on all the medical milk commissions to tell you what all went in, the doing away so the dairyman never would make any money. He wasn't going to do it. It ended up being the distributors had the milk when all the babies were dying, and they're not dying today. I think you turn it over to a family, and I think it'd be wonderful, but they need to have more than just a grade of milk. They could have a probiotic to begin with, and then they do have milk that needs to be pasteurized. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Mathis.
Anybody want to ask me any questions?
I've got a final person who's taking time to come. Audrey Franklin, is she here? Or she left?
Oh, I'm here. I didn't know I was signing in to speak, though.
Oh, okay. Well, good. Well, thank you for being here. Dale Sandlin, does he want to come back? Do you want to come back? You're good. Well, thank you. Author of the bill, Chairman Perkle, do you have any other thing to say? Well, I appreciate the committee. I really do. Your patience. I knew it was going to be a lot of information here, and not everything is black and white with this issue. But y'all, I think the status of the committee right now is let's think about what we heard today. Give the author some of your thoughts. I know some of y'all have some good opinion on this, and he's offered to look at all parts of the bill and make improvements or whatever he feels he needs to do. We will have another committee meeting early next week, I think, and I'm not 100% sure. I think we're scheduled for Tuesday. Lee is here. I'll make sure she gets that schedule out to us. We'll have a couple of other bills on Tuesday for hearing only. Nothing's quite ready to pass. Also, Lee has sent, I think y'all, on February 23rd, our Ag Committee dinner at Fogo de Chao. Put that on your calendars. Spouses are welcome at that also. And the Taste of Georgia is also earlier that day down at the depot. So got a lot going on with committee. Thank you for your patience today. We're adjourned. Thank you for being here.